What's up everybody, welcome back to our channel. We are Deanna and Phil and we finally made it to New York City.
Woo!
At the end of our 3-month stay on the east coast of the US, we left one highlight for the very end. I dreamed of visiting Manhattan since I was a child, and since booking our stay a few weeks back, I was looking towards it with kind of mixed feelings. New York City is often portrayed on television and movies as this amazing, one-of-a-kind place, and since my expectations for most of the hyped-up cities that I've visited so far were often not met, I really had to manage them this time to not be disappointed by one of my childhood dreams and bucket list items. But bear with me. The sheer amount of man-made buildings, streets and bridges in all of New York City struck me immediately as something of a scale I have never experienced before. Crossing the Robert F. Kennedy Bridge into Manhattan felt like entering a surreal toy world of gigantic Lego high-rises in which I am not more than a tiny, irrelevant grain of sand. Just look at the size of the Queensboro Bridge connecting Queens to Manhattan. On arrival, we checked in to our $123 per night Pot Hotel at 51st Street. This hotel turned out to be quite nice and we made an entire video about it. The sun was already setting on this day, but we went out on a walk to explore the surroundings. I can highly recommend the location as we walked by several famous sites within the first hour. These include Grand Central Station, which oddly has an open Apple store right on the top of the famous stairs, which are good to take a quick selfie. We continued on, passing by Radio City Music Hall, Madison Square Garden, and the famous Rockefeller Center ice skating rink. The city at night felt amazing right away, and as we made our way back to the hotel, I couldn't wait for the days to come. The next morning, we went out a little earlier.
Not bad.
We had a $15 bagel and a $1 pizza slice.
Our goal was to walk down towards the southern end as far as possible. One thing that stood out to me is every time crossing the street, the view down these canyons of buildings seems to end in the sky. As far as you can see, there's just no end. It feels like a surreal city of another dimension. So while walking down 5th Avenue and Broadway, we came across Madison Square Park, which is nice to take a quick break, play with dogs, and have a great view of the famous Flatiron Building next door. After crossing Washington Square Park, we followed Broadway down south and slowly entered Lower Manhattan, which has a very different flair to it. The buildings are not as high and not as modern. It is overall a bit rougher and feels more like the New York out of 90s movies. The famous Ghostbusters building is not far away. You can creep on 368 or move over to Chinatown to hang with the locals. Chinatown itself feels a bit more honest than the polished parts of Manhattan and is great for more budget-friendly food. We ate at a little restaurant called Wo Hop and we were super happy with the portion sizes, the prices, and afterwards can totally recommend coming to Chinatown for food.
How cool is this? I get 2 cookies and 2 fortunes in 1 cookie. But 3 fortunes total, but I had to give Bill one.
Because I had none in mine.
Yeah. It is sometimes better to travel hopefully than to arrive. And
The other one?
It may be well to consult others before taking unusual actions.
Always ask me, I'm wise. Mine says, how about another fortune? Secondfortune.com.
Further south, the financial district starts. More high-rises, newer buildings, and plenty of suits walking around give this part a modern feeling again. I was not too impressed by Wall Street itself, and it gets very hectic at lunch hours. At the famous Charging Bull, you have to queue in line for a picture with either the bull's head or my recommendation, the balls.
What do you think? Should we queue?
No.
What would you prefer, balls or head?
Balls.
Horns or balls or horns?
For sure.
We don't like playing that game, so we ventured on without a picture towards more important things: One World Trade Center and Ground Zero. Ground Zero is my new favorite memorial. The water flowing seemingly into the abyss, the quiet surroundings and the engraved names of all the victims really makes you feel the extent of the tragedy that went down at this very spot. Being this close to the skyscrapers and looking over at One World Trade Center, the idea of what it must have been like for two huge aircrafts hitting the Twin Towers felt much more terrifying in this moment than I've ever imagined before. From the memorial, it's just a couple of minutes walk to the southern end of Manhattan. From here you get a great view of New Jersey, Staten Island, Brooklyn and the Statue of Liberty in the distance.
Wow.
It's huge.
Aside from several boat cruises, you can take the Staten Island ferry free of charge and drive by Lady Liberty over to Staten Island and back within 2 hours. But due to weather, crowded boats and days being short in November, we opted out this time and instead made our way over to the East River. The famous Brooklyn Bridge was a big surprise to me. Again, it was the sheer size that stands out, and combined with the amazing view of the financial district and the industrial feeling of the bridge itself, I highly recommend walking over to Brooklyn and take some amazing pictures on the way. Arriving in Brooklyn's Dumbo district, you immediately feel a hip and lofty vibe, and I really like this area in the evening. Strolling along the East River, you find iconic views of the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges and probably one of the best views of Manhattan itself.
It looks like middle of the night, but it's actually 5:30. Just ran over the bridge there in the background, and we ran over to Brooklyn to pee, because you don't pee in Manhattan, you pee in Brooklyn.
That's not a thing.
And it's getting freaking cold. I think
cold.
It's around 0 degrees right now, aka 32 Fahrenheit.
With wind, so it's worse.
We're gonna call it a day for today, I guess. Take public transportation back. I'm curious how long that's gonna take. But yeah, 5:30 we're leaving.
We took the metro back just as rush hour hit, and this in itself is quite the experience. I don't think this is one of the most modern or best metros, but it certainly has that New York City charm, and you should ride it at least once while you are here. The next day we started out with the one thing that I was looking forward the most: going up the Empire State Building. It was a work day, and surprisingly there was no queue at all. You just walk in and the building appears super modern on the inside. You basically walk through a New York City museum first, which I loved, as it was a bit of a time travel experience into the city's past, showing it at different stages of development. Afterwards, you go on one of the smoothest elevator rides ever that takes you to the 86th floor in a matter of seconds. The 360 degrees viewing platform was also not too crowded and, to our surprise, heated, which made it super comfortable. This view is absolutely fantastic. I almost cheaped out over the $38 entrance fee, but oh my god, is this worth it. I think going up on viewpoints and viewing platforms always gives you a whole new perspective and is totally worth it. Manhattan is still building a lot of buildings, and it's still getting taller, as there are several buildings that are higher than the Empire State Building already, and that will even be higher than the One World Trade Center by roof height. Even one of my favorites, the Chrysler Building, seems to be slowly outgrown by its neighborhood. Our visit to the Empire State Building turned out to be my highlight of this trip and is highly recommended.
It's awesome. You can spend hours here just looking at these places.
It's a crazy impressive view. I was a little more skeptical about going. I was like, meh, it's not going to be that great. It's just overpriced and it's worth it. Dude, this is amazing. I don't even love buildings as much as Phil does. He has like a boner for every building we see.
Making our way north towards Central Park brings you to New York's most infamous place, Times Square. It was probably the time of the year, but our experience with Times Square really was not bad at all. It was not crazily crowded, cosplayers weren't too pushy, and the feeling of being in the heart of the city, that is the heart of the US and therefore the Western world, right, is just one of a kind. Does this make this the center of the universe? Before I forget, one must-do thing in New York City is pizza. New York-style pizza is famous around the world and there are pizza shops at every corner. We dedicated an entire video to New York's pizza, and pizza slices in New York are one of the best budget options for quick food on the streets. I just love that pizza and all kinds of food is always just a short walk away.
That's the best combo bite right there.
One of the last things we did was to make our way up to Central Park. The park was bigger than I expected and the street noise almost disappears completely. I really enjoyed having this option in the middle of this crazy city. There is plenty to discover in the park, like this small castle we found, and even though it was November and pretty cold outside, visiting Central Park was a lot of fun. I can see it being absolutely amazing in summer. New York's major attractions are pretty well known by most people, but I was surprised of how good most of them turned out to be. The real charm of this city, though, are the infinite smaller things to discover at every corner. It really felt like a living organism that is never sleeping and in constant change. We missed out seeing many things like the High Line, the Vessel, the Statue of Liberty up close. We didn't explore Brooklyn, the Bronx or Queens, and I also couldn't find neither Central Perk nor McLaren's Pub. As I said in the beginning, I have quite the imagination when it comes to cities, and Manhattan managed to be the one that unexpectedly exceeded my expectations. I still cannot stop thinking about this city, and we will definitely be back in the future.